You've probably heard of it, right? BMI, body mass index. It's this one little number that's supposed to tell us so much about our health. But, what's the real story here? Let's dig in and find out.
And yeah, that really is the million-dollar question. Can one single number actually define how healthy you are? Or is there a whole lot more going on that we're missing?
All right, here's what we're going to cover. First, the basics. What even is BMI? Then we'll get into the good stuff, the flaws, why it's not a one-size-fits-all thing, and finally, how we should probably be thinking about our health instead.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. What is this thing? At its heart, BMI was meant to be a really simple, super accessible way to get a quick snapshot of someone's weight.
So, here's the deal. BMI is just a calculation. It takes your height, it takes your weight, and it spits out a number that's supposed to estimate your body fat. The whole point was to have a quick way to flag potential health risks tied to weight. But, and this is a big but, it's just a screening tool. It's not the final word, not by a long shot.
Okay, so you get this number, but what does it mean? Well, it puts you into a specific category. Let's take a look at what those categories are.
All right, so this is the classic chart you always see. If your BMI is somewhere between 18.5 and 24.9, that's generally called moderate or healthy. Once you hit 25, you're in the overweight zone, and 30 and up gets the obesity label. Seems simple enough, right? Well, as we're about to find out, these little labels are exactly where things start to get complicated.
So why even have these categories in the first place? Well, they come from these massive studies that looked at huge groups of people and found links between weight and certain health problems. A super low BMI was connected to things like malnutrition or anemia, and a high BMI was linked to a greater risk of stuff like heart disease or type 2 diabetes. The key here is that it's all about spotting potential risks across a whole population, not necessarily for one individual.
Okay, so, seems pretty straightforward, right? A simple number for a complex topic. But this is the moment where we pull back the curtain, because the story is way, way more complicated than that. And here we have it, the absolute heart of the problem, and it's backed by a ton of research. Just look at this quote. Studies are showing that BMI is actually a pretty lousy way to figure out someone's real body fat percentage.
And why is that? Well, here's the biggest reason. The BMI formula is kind of dumb. It only sees one thing, your total weight. It has absolutely no clue what that weight is made of. It can't tell the difference between a pound of dense, heavy muscle and a pound of fluffy fat. And that, you can imagine, is a massive, massive flaw.
This right here is the perfect example. Picture an Olympic athlete. We're talking pure muscle, very little body fat. All that dense muscle can actually give them a high BMI, maybe even flagging them as overweight. It's crazy. Now imagine someone who doesn't work out much, has less muscle and more body fat. They could have the exact same BMI as that athlete. The number is identical, but their bodies and their health, totally different worlds.
So we already have this muscle versus fat problem. But this whole one-size-fits-all approach gets even shakier when we start looking at people from different parts of the world.
Yeah, this is a really important piece of the puzzle. The standard BMI chart, the one we all know, it was mostly developed using data from white people. But here's the thing. We know for a fact now that body composition, how much muscle and fat people have, can be really different depending on your sex, race, and ethnicity.
Check this out. A study in Brazil found something fascinating. For men, a BMI of around 30 was a pretty good marker for obesity, but for women, the more accurate cutoff was way down at 25. Think about that. That's the difference between being labeled moderate and obese. That is a huge, huge difference in how risk is perceived.
And it doesn't stop there. This is another really critical point. For a lot of people in the Asia-Pacific region, major health risks, we're talking things like type 2 diabetes, can show up at a BMI that's less than 25. That's a number that the standard chart would call perfectly fine or normal. See the problem?
Because of findings like this, the World Health Organization is now suggesting we need different charts for different groups. Like for Asia-Pacific populations, they're saying the overweight category should probably start at a BMI of 23, not 25. It just goes to show you, context is absolutely everything.
Okay, so after hearing all that, you might be thinking, well, is BMI just useless then? Should we throw it out? And the answer is, not quite. It's really more about understanding what it is and what it isn't. So let's break it down. What's the main takeaway here? Look, BMI isn't totally useless, but you gotta see it for what it is, a very simple screening tool. It's a conversation starter, not a diagnosis. It has no idea if you're made of muscle or fat, and it definitely doesn't apply the same way to every single person on the planet. The best way to think about it is this. It's not a final judgment on your health. It's just a reason to start a conversation with your doctor. And when you have that conversation, your doctor is probably going to bring in other tools to get a better picture. They might use things like waist-to-hip ratio, which can tell you where your body stores fat, or they might look at your actual body fat percentage. These tools add all the important details that BMI just glosses over.
So let's leave it with this thought. If we know that one little number can't possibly tell the whole story of our health, it forces us to ask a much better question, right? What really matters? What about our fitness levels, the food we eat, our sleep, our stress, all the things that actually paint the full picture of our well-being? It's the perfect reminder that your health is so much more than just a number.